Good evening, and thanks very much again for coming out on a cold night. And I know that when you sit in a meeting you can get a little bit sleepy and bored, so I'm going to actually get you to do something to begin with, and we're going to actually make an artwork. This artwork is to send to the children in Fukushima, because I think today we should actually be thinking most of all about the people who are actually living there. And are living, we've been talking about the possible theories of what might happen in Britain. Of course, so the people in Japan and families are actually living with that now. So I'd like you to grab the nearest picture that you can find, please. If you could jump up and do that, it's very easy to do, to get the blood coursing through your veins. If you haven't got a picture, then these pictures actually these pictures were designed by children in Fukushima. And I inserted their portrait according to their idea. So there's some more here. Can you pass some more around, please? There's one. There's more. Yes, sir. Right. There's another one there. Look. Nice one of picture. Okay, let's try and do this fairly quickly. If you could hold it up, preferably by the side of your face, so we can see your face. And imagine if you're a child, fairly scared because the people around you are confused, you're getting lots of different mixed messages, how powerful it is to feel that British and Japanese people in the government building across the world are actually holding your picture. So I'm hoping this is going to be quite exciting for you. Oh yeah, it's looking good. So on this section, fantastic. And over here. That's it. Say cheese. So what we're doing here is we're using art to complete the circle from their experience through our being here in this meeting tonight because we care about it, and back to them. And that's one of the great things that art can do. So these children produce their thoughts, and you're now returning to them with added power. So thanks very much, and that will have us. We'll have the expert view here. Tremendous, nearly done. And one last big one. Oh yes, it's looking good. Superb, thank you very much. Now they say, an old saying that it takes a village to raise a child, but in the case of Fukushima's children, it's going to take a global community to raise those children safely. We'll talk a little bit more between us about their situation, but I'd like to start off by trying to give a little bit of emotional reality to the sort of more general political and economic arguments we've been hearing tonight. So I'm going to explain my experience and that of other people in the Fukushima community. But what I want you to do is to imagine that when I'm talking about my family, about the Japanese family, you're actually thinking about your family and what you would do and your neighbours would do if you were faced with the choice that families in Fukushima were faced with. So probably the key point, of course, when you experience it immediately is on reality. You'll see it happening on television, you'll go, I thought this could happen. It's actually happening, and that takes quite some time for it to sink in. And your next thought process might be, what do I do next? And if you have children, that is not a kind of a distant, well, I might be okay. It's what do I need to do right now, this minute? What am I going? Do I need to move or not? Now, unfortunately, in Japan, there was no information. The mainstream media were downplaying everything and are continuing to do so. The government was not releasing information. And if I can just give you a flavour of what that means on the ground, I'm going to read you a quote from a mother who was living close to the plant of my family about what to do. I was feeling in a rush, but I couldn't decide. I couldn't think properly about the routes to escape Fukushima because I was in a panic. Finally, I allowed my children to be exposed to radiation by staying in Fukushima. I discovered later that the radiation level was then 24 microsieverts an hour in Fukushima. I thought, that could be worse. I didn't know how dangerous it was. and my children and I were queuing outside to get water for 2 hours. Then I was thinking that Fukushima City would not have much fallout compared to Soma City. This was an innocent and optimistic view. It was the opposite. If the speedy data, and that is the weather modelling that shows you where the plume would come over, which incidentally the UK has the ability to produce but doesn't produce. The Japanese government had it. If that speedy data had been announced quickly and we were told to stay indoors, I definitely would not have let my children go outside. It was announced officially that Koriyama City had lower radiation levels, so I sent my children by bus to relatives in Koriyama on the 17th, and I later discovered that again, this was wrong. So you can see absolute chaos. People not knowing what to do, sending their children backwards and forwards, not knowing what to do for the best. Especially the particular area that I sent them to had high radiation level. It's awful. I got information in the afternoon that the highway buses were going to begin running again because all the transport system had finished. I rushed them back to Fukushima City. We got to the bus to Tokyo, but we waited for the bus for 1 hour in high radiation and a cold wind. We were unnecessarily exposed to radiation again. So I think that mother's words give you a sense of the feeling of panic that you might experience. Now, would it be any different in the UK? Now, I'd like to talk about information. Although I sort of maybe had a layperson's view about nuclear power previously, I didn't actually know very much about radiation. And I can tell you now that although it may have changed slightly since Fukushima, when you look, you will not be enlightened. You won't be enlightened by the scientific community, you won't be enlightened by the World Health Organization, because I understand it, their pronouncements on the health effects of nuclear power are actually vetoed by the International Atomic Energy Authority. So as a father I thought, well, what does that mean? I can see them saying that, but what does that mean in that case? Can I trust that or not? And there doesn't appear to be a scientific consensus in the public domain. There simply seems to be a kind of a dogfight. I think the situation as a parent, I would say it's analogous maybe to the situation about the dangers of smoking some years ago, where you would think you're hearing different messages. You've got areas of government too close to the industry because of taxation and revenue, and so you can't trust the information. So you won't actually know what to do. And also in Fukushima, it was really divided, and families are divided, because some of them have access to slightly more accurate information through peer-to-peer sharing now, through Twitter and the internet, which actually proved to be essential resources and more trustworthy than official resources. And also the possibility of getting information from abroad, because if in England there was a nuclear reactor, I think that the only trustworthy information we could probably get would be from abroad and through the community. Because in the early days of the internet, the community was kind of ridiculed as being, the home of cranks. But actually, in Fukushima, time after time after time, what was first shared on the internet proved to actually be the case, and the government had to finally admit that that was the case. So in the UK, I would like to see that the media, that we've been talking about the debate and the kind of, if you like, I might call it the non-bio line, because it's the one related that The Guardian seems to use through about global change. It's as if there's one opinion to have. Now that is scary, even if it's the right opinion, it's still scary in an democracy to think there's one opinion. So I would say the UK press is failing, and I wouldn't necessarily trust them to do a better job than the Japanese press did. And we need to think about how, as a community, we can share that information and support ourselves. So, what as a parent I felt I needed was accurate information, which wasn't available, and we needed help. And we actually had to make a decision ourselves, because the local authorities were paralysed and were waiting for instructions from above, which didn't come. So they had no plans for evacuating their own children, no contingency plans. Everything was okay, just kind of smile and carry on. And I asked my brother, who's a public health official based in Lancaster, and out of his bedroom window where I stayed, I could see the nuclear power station on the coast. And I said, what's the evacuation plan for here? He said, we don't have one. I said, well, do you think it might be a good idea to have one? Because I can see it there, it's about 3 miles away. And he's a public health official. I asked him to ask his colleagues what the plan was, and I asked for advice at the time when I was in Fukushima, and they couldn't give me any advice. So I hope that gives you a flavour of where we're at in Britain. So we do need to push our MPs for that. I would ask you to think in terms of when you see the statistics, and I think the first results are now coming out about health effects of Fukushima's children, the first case of thyroid cancer, and so on. That the governments and economists and politicians, scientists to a degree, talking percentages. If you're a parent, you don't really care what percentage your child is part of, you just want your child to be well. And when you hold those children's lives in your hand, as you've just done in a symbolic way today, that's how important it is. Not so much the general picture, but the absolute value of each person and each child's life. Thank you.